Scott McGivery blew up Instagram when he posted the cost to get into the real estate market across Canada, and most notably Toronto and Vancouver being significantly more expensive than the rest of the country. I'm Mike Ouzas, I'm a realtor here in Toronto, and I wanted to go through this article to show exactly why the cost to get into real estate is so much higher on one of these average charts. And if you ever want to book in a call with me to discuss what's been going on the ground level in Toronto real estate, and newsflash, you can purchase a property for much less than what that down payment shows in the article. You can book in a call with me in the first link down below. Here's the article from BlogTO. It now takes the average person 39 years to save for a home in the greater Toronto area. They pulled the data from Zoocasa, which we will jump into the actual article shortly. And it says that the average time it will take someone to save up for the down payment in Canada's most expensive regions may shock you. In the past, I've done other videos on the Zoocasa report, which discusses the down payment and time it takes to save to purchase a property in some of the most major markets across Canada. Anytime you see an article that discusses what the cost is to do something in real estate, it's really important to see where that cost comes from and why it is what it is. There are many properties that you could still purchase in Toronto for the same entry cost as areas like Regina, Edmonton, and other lower priced cities on this list. The biggest difference, however, is what you can purchase for those costs. But let's break down what it says in this article and go through why exactly Toronto, Vancouver, and even the Fraser Valley are significantly higher than the other ones on the list. Here's the article from Zoocasa. It says, want to buy a house in Canada? Here's how long you'll have to save in 2024. This is on Zoocasa's website by Angela Serednicki. In the study, Zoocasa analyzed housing markets in 20 major cities across Canada, calculating the required down payment for each. They then determined how long it would take for a median post-tax income household to save for the minimum down payment on a single family home using Stats Canada data and assuming a savings rate of 6.2% of their annual income. And that's post-tax income, it looks like. This savings rate was sourced from Stats Canada Q4 2023 household savings rate. Furthermore, mortgage calculations assumed a 25-year amortization period and a fixed 5-year mortgage rate of 4.84%. These are important stats to factor in when looking at any of these kind of how much it costs to do X charts. The reason having these numbers is important is because then you can see that if someone is saving 6.2% of their post-tax income, this is how long it would take for them to save the average down payment on a average price property in these areas. They've done a good job in breaking this down by different areas across the country. Fraser Valley, which is just outside of Vancouver, and Victoria represent BC. Edmonton, Calgary in Alberta, Regina, Saskatoon in Saskatchewan, Winnipeg in Manitoba, Kitchener-Waterloo, Ottawa, Niagara, Hamilton, Burlington, and Greater Toronto, and even Thunder Bay for Ontario, Montreal, Quebec for Quebec, St. John, New Brunswick, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. Interestingly, when you're looking at these numbers, it shows the minimum down payment. Flipping over to how they come up with the minimum down payment needed is the same across Canada. These are federal regulations. If you're looking at a property under $500,000 or a purchase price of under $500,000, the minimum down payment is 5%. Anywhere from $500 to $999,999. It's 5% of the first $500,000 and 10% of the difference between $500,000 up to just under $1 million. Anything over $1 million requires a minimum down payment of 20%. For example's sake, if you were to purchase a property for $499,000, your minimum down payment would be just under $25,000. If you were to purchase a property for $650,000, your minimum down payment would be $25,000 for the first $500,000, and then 10% of the difference between $500,000 and $650,000. So that's $150,000. 10% of that is $15,000. So the minimum down payment on $650,000 is $40,000. Once you hit that $1 million price point, you automatically go to 20% down minimum, regardless of anything else other than 20% has to go down on that property when purchasing with a mortgage. Also important to note that you can add more than the minimum down payment, but these are just the absolute minimums required across Canada. I always would recommend to save anywhere between 1.5 and 2% closing costs. If you are in a city like Toronto, which has double land transfer tax, I'd actually recommend having 3% available for closing costs because of that double double land transfer tax. Jumping back here to this chart where it says Edmonton, you would need a minimum down payment to purchase the average property for $19,495, which that puts the average price point somewhere in around $400,000 if my math is correct. Whereas in Calgary, looking at $33,250, that average price point is somewhere around $600,000. If you're looking at Greater Vancouver or the Fraser Valley, these are over $200,000, and Greater Vancouver at almost $251,000 actually. They're saying it would take 50.6 years to save that down payment at 6.2% a year of savings. But keep in mind, the reason this is at $251,000 is because the average price in Vancouver is somewhere around $1.2 million. If we look at Toronto, where that average down payment is $205,000, our average price point has been hovering around $1.1 million. So that's where that number comes into play. Remember, above that $1 million mark, you do require that 20% down. That's why these are standing out so much compared to all the others. Even the Fraser Valley is over $200,000, just over $1 million on average for that area. It does go on to mention the difference of the down payment requirements and the household saving rate Q4 sourced from Stats Canada, and the household incomes, they used a median sourced from Stats Canada in 2021. If you're looking at Regina, Saskatchewan, an average single family home price for January 2024 was just about $283,000. Minimum down payment required just under $11,000. Median household income for Regina, Saskatchewan coming in at $79,000, and time to save for that minimum down payment 2.2 years. Now, of course, Toronto, Fraser Valley, and Greater Vancouver are at the top of this list with an over a $200,000 down payment required. And here's the average price points for these areas. So $1,026,000 Greater Toronto in January. If you've seen the stats video, that number actually went over 1.1 in February. Fraser Valley at $1,010,000 and Greater Vancouver just over 1.25 million. Now, it is mentioning that the median total household income for these cities is $85,000, $78,000, $80,000 respectively, which puts it on par with a city like Edmonton, Alberta and Calgary, Alberta. The time to save for that minimum down payment is, of course, totally different across the board. But if you are looking for a minimum down payment on your first property, and I would argue that in Toronto, a $1.1 million property is generally not someone's first property. That's typically the start of a freehold townhouse or even a semi-detached that needs some work. But going into the condo market, you can get into the market for much lower than that price point. Maybe somewhere in around where Calgary's coming in, around $582,000. You could get a nice one-bedroom condo in the city of Toronto without parking, mind you, for $582,000 and get you onto the real estate ladder moving forward. So it's not always when you see these $1.1 million that every property is worth that. This is just one of those articles that, again, breaking it down is super important. That's the article where a lot of the headlines have been coming out lately on how long it takes to save for the average down payment across Canada. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below on what you think, and if you have any ideas to save more faster, or if it's possible to get into the market, as we just discussed, with less than that 200 plus down payment in cities like Toronto and Vancouver. Drop a comment down below, and we are on a quest to hit 500 subscribers by the end of April. So hit that like and subscribe button. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.